What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Raw Prospect Podcast. My name is Emmy Nixon. Today is August the 14th, 2022, and we're recording episode 116. It's going to be an NFC West episode. We're continuing our division preview series. Then we're going to close the show with some MLB talk. We're going to talk about the Fernando Tatis Jr. suspension. But joining me from Austin, Texas, the Stat King himself, Mr. Michael Ween. What's up?
Well, it's a good time here on August 14th at about 11 p.m. Central Time, the time at which we are recording this episode. Before I say anything, be sure to go like and subscribe to our channel, tell your friends about our channel, and tune in to the division previews that we have recorded already. We have done the AFC North, the NFC North, and we've recorded the AFC West. I'm not sure that's up yet, but it will be up soon if it's not. And Emmy does a great job editing those videos. So if you don't want to listen to it, you can always go watch it on our YouTube channel. So be sure to do all that stuff. We greatly appreciate it. But yeah, we're here today. I'm done with my tests, so that's a big weight off my shoulder now. So we're back in the business of recording. Today we're going to hit the NFC West, hopefully talk a little college football. And then at the end, we might talk about the Tatis suspension. I really want to, but we had some big news break on Friday. But if we don't have time and it's running a little over, we'll push that to the next episode. So yeah, I'm excited to talk football. So let's just get right into it.
Yeah. So we're going to start off with we're going to go bottom to the top based on last year's standings, and that's going to start us off with the Seattle Seahawks. So last year the Seahawks, I guess you could call it the end of an era where they started off the year with high expectations. They started okay, and then Russell Wilson suffered that finger injury, kept them out for a while, and they weren't able to recover from that. And they ended up missing the playoffs by a pretty wide margin. And now they're heading into a new era with Russell Wilson off the roster now. They traded him to the Broncos, and they've injected this team with a lot of youth as well. So, Michael, we'll start with you. What did you think of the Seahawks offseason, and just what are your overall takeaways?
Well, the trade of Russell Wilson and losing Bobby Wagner and so many other veterans, Dwayne Brown, and so many others, officially marks the end of what I think was the greatest era in Seattle Seahawks history. I think that's pretty standout, clear, inarguable. They had the Jim Zorn days way back in the day, but other than that, didn't have too much success. They got to 2 Super Bowls. They won a Super Bowl. They should have won 2. But yeah, it officially marks the end of an era, the best era in Seahawks history. I know there's some obvious things that we can talk about at the quarterback position, but we'll save those for here in a minute. I want to talk about the defense for a second. This team made a lot of changes on defense. They also lost some veteran talent. They actually fired their defensive coordinator, They switched to their new coordinator, Clint Hurt, who has promised in the reports coming out of Seattle to use more of a 3-4 front, try to improve the rush off the edge because Seattle has really liked the effective pass rush in years past. And he's promised to bring a more aggressive defense. So I'm curious to see if with the personnel they've brought in through the draft, if they can get this defense back to what it needs to be for this team to have success. However, I do have questions. The defensive line is a big question. I like what they have on the interior with Poona Ford, sort of more of an established veteran going into the 6th year. They got Shelby Harris in the deal with Denver in that Russell Wilson trade. He's a veteran guy. And I do like Al Woods and Quentin Jefferson as well. But the edge rush continues and will be a question going forward until some of these younger guys uh, step up. Boye Mafe is a guy that they drafted, I believe, out of Minnesota,
Right.
and Tyreek Smith as well. And then they had some guys that they drafted last year too that need to step up because you lose Carlos Dunlap, you lose Benson Mayoa, and you lose Rasheem Green. So these young pieces are going to have to step up on the edge in a team that's really lacked an effective pass rush. I like what they have up the middle, but the linebacker group without Bobby Wagner is a question. I do like that they did acquire Uchenna Nwosu, who was a guy that got playing time with the Chargers last year. And he's a younger guy, will provide some athleticism, and hopefully he can step up as well. But that's a big question, the pass rush. And then the secondary, this is a secondary. We know what's at the safety spot. Most likely, if I had to guess, the highest paid safety duo in the league with Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams. We like all that. But at the corner spot, there are a ton of questions. You lose DJ Reed. I mean, this is a corner group last year that really underachieved, only had 2 interceptions coming from the corner spot, and they were both from DJ Reed, who left this offseason. They chose not to give him a contract. So, you have some younger guys. Trey Brown is the leader for one of those spots, who showed some flashes last year. And you also have Sidney Jones. And you drafted your 4th-round pick, Kobe Bryant, out of Cincinnati, along with Tariq Woolen out of UTSA. So hopefully those guys can step up. But I have questions on the defensive side of the football. What does this defensive coordinator bring to the game? Who steps up in the pass rush? Although there is a lot of young talent, I'll give them that. And I love the Nwosu signing. And who plays cornerback? So, yeah, that's the defense. But I do like what they have up front in the interior. On the offensive side, this team still has weapons. You lose Chris Carson. He retires because of neck injuries. So hopefully he's okay. You still have Tyler Lockett. You give DK Metcalf the extension. And I'm curious to see what he looks like in his rapport with these new quarterbacks. But the main question on offense, is the quarterback battle between Gino Smith and Drew Locke. And that's really the biggest question right now in Seattle is who's playing quarterback for them and what does it look like? Because we haven't seen good things from Drew Locke. And Geno Smith is experienced, showed some good things last year. But the question is, will he be able to do it consistently enough as a starter? And with this tough division and the schedule that they have, I'm just not sure. So with losing all this veteran talent and the huge uncertainty at quarterback, I'm just not sure about how much success Seattle can have this year.
Right, exactly. It's an interesting situation at quarterback. I do think that Gino will end up winning that job, just because I know that Pete Carroll always sides with whoever shows more in camp and in practice and in the games. He's always going to pick that guy, no matter what the team has invested in a certain player or whatever the case may be. However young a player is, whatever the case may be, he's always just going to go with the guy who has shown more in practice, and I think that's probably going to end up being Geno Smith. But then lies the question: is will the offensive line protect Geno Smith? Because we've seen it so many times. Also, Wilson, pull some Houdini type stuff. It's like pull a cat out of a hat, a rabbit out of a hat, not a cat. But you get the point. Is this offense going to be able to function in any sort of way with a traditional pocket passer who isn't as able to create outside of the pocket? And another thing I want to see is how will this team look with Pete Carroll back in complete control over both sides of the ball. Over the last few years, we've seen the movement for the, let Russ cook, but there's always been pushback from, the coaching staff, and obviously not just Pete Carroll, but Pete Carroll leads a lot of that for sure. There's always been pushback from the coaching staff to where by the end of the season, they end up, the same Seattle Seahawks, running over 50% of the time and, embracing that part of the game. So now with Russell Wilson gone and that era of football gone, are we going to see the old brand of Pete Carroll football, which is, running the ball 60+% of the time and then, basically just throwing about, less than 30 times a game, so will that even bring any success? Because I think Pete Carroll he still has a lot of good coaching years left in him. We'll have to see what he can do.
Yeah, we'll have to see. And going to your point, I guess, we've seen in the past 5 or so years as the league has shifted to a more quarterback-dominated, wide receiver, offensive dominated league where offenses are explosive. The rules have shifted towards the offense, away from the defense with some of the penalties, some of the things that the defense is not allowed to do. So, yeah, this is, if you watched the playoffs last year, you got to be able to score points to win games. But here's what I will say. We've seen in years past that it is possible to win games and be a competitive football team within the regular season, being a run-dominant team, and just having a solid foundation on defense or a really good defense. Now, as I spoke previously, I have questions about this defense, but if some of these young players step up and the cornerback dilemma isn't as bad as I think it is, you never know. And with this new defensive coordinator, there's just a lot of questions right now, and I'm uncertain that can be the case for Seattle. But I want to talk about a couple things I did like about the Seahawks offseason. I mentioned Nwosu is a player I love. I think they went out and got him in free agency. I love doing that. I actually, for the first time in a while, really liked their draft. I typically, in the past, haven't loved some of the drafts, that the Seattle Seahawks have had, but you potentially drafted two of your future tackles on the offensive line, and Charles Cross, the number 1 pick out of Mississippi State. Love it. Love that pick. And then Abraham Lucas out of Washington State, the bigger guy, 6'6", 332, a third-round pick who will compete to start, opposite Charles Cross at right tackle. And that's really a question on the offensive line. You lose Dwayne Brown, but I do like you injecting some youth on this offensive line. I like the interior of their offensive line with Gabe Jackson and Austin Blythe, the guy who has started at center, been in the league a long time with the Rams. I do like that. And I love the running back group. Talk about a team that might want to run the football a whole lot. Well, they have depth at that position. We know Chris Carson retired, but saw flashes. I've seen flashes from Rashad Penny before, as long as he stays healthy. And this Kenneth Walker dude that they drafted out of Michigan State, he showed flashes in last night's preseason game against the Steelers. And I really think he's going to be a good asset for them, along with Travis Homer, along with DJ Dallas. These running backs all provide different skill sets. So at the very least, you're a running football team. The interior offensive line is fine. There are questions at the tackle spots, but you have depth at the running back position. You've been successful in running the football in years past. You have some established weapons still on the outside with Metcalf, Locke. You get a younger tight end, Noah Fant. So yeah, I like bits and pieces, but there are so many questions, uh, you know, everywhere. So I just don't know. I just don't know.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. And the key to having a running football team and defensive minded team is having those pass rushers and having those playmakers on the defensive side. And I think one guy that we haven't mentioned yet, Jamal Adams, I think he has to have a bounce back year for this Seattle defense to be any form of um, decent. I just think Adams, his ability to, wreak havoc on blitzes, just read the game. He hasn't had a good stint with Seattle so far. He's really struggled in coverage, but he really hasn't, been um, a coverage oriented player like his through his career. He's been a box safety his entire career. That's where he's at his best. So if Seattle can embrace that, I still think he has a lot of good football in him.
I do too. I love what they have at the safety position, as long as what you mentioned, Adams can get back to playing some of the football he was playing in New York, as it's sort of been a rough go in Seattle. Let's look at their schedule real quick, and then we'll move on. Um, I was hoping they might catch a break early with some easier games, but they don't. Their schedule's tough right out of the gate. They got to face Russell Wilson right out of the gate on Monday Night Football. That game is in Seattle, so there will be a lot of emotion, I'm assuming, but that's going to be a tough one. Then you gotta follow that by going to San Francisco. You get a winnable game at home in week 3 against Atlanta, but after that, it's a slog. At Detroit is not what it used to be. If we think things pan out for Detroit, that's not going to be easy. At New Orleans, Arizona within your division, at the Chargers. Giants at home is another winnable one, but then at Arizona, Tampa Bay, in Germany. So you got to fly all the way across the country
Oh my goodness.
from the West Coast. And then you get your bye week, which is, I guess, fine. But then coming out of the bye week, it doesn't get any easier. Las Vegas, the Rams, even Carolina, who has a quarterback now that has, experience. They got pressure to win down there. San Francisco at Kansas City, the Jets, and the Rams. So this schedule's brutal. It really is.
Yeah, even the teams that weren't very good last year that they play have a lot of talent added and a lot of good vibes going into this year. So this schedule could be really really tough. And the fact that you said they're playing Tampa Bay in Germany is just absolutely brutal. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness. Um and that's going to lead into their bye week. That you'd think that for that type of game they'd have the bye week be before that, but it is what it is. Um, yeah, that schedule it's it's not fun. It could be a rough ride.
absolutely. So with that, why don't you lead us into our next NFC West team?
Yeah, the next team is going to be would it be the Niners?
We can do Niners or Cardinals. They both were in
Yeah.
the playoffs. I'd say the Cardinals because the Cardinals didn't go as far.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. We'll go ahead and do the Cardinals then. Um, the Cardinals had a really, their hands were tied. They didn't have much cap space, and they had a lot of guys they needed to retain. They ultimately lost Chandler Jones, um, and they're really going into this year kind of relying on Kyler Murray taking another step forward, and I think the depth of this team is really what hurt the most from this offseason. I think they still have a lot of quality talent in terms of starters, but just those key depth pieces are so important in a long 17 game season. Um, that depth is so important, especially in a tough division. But I do like the trade for Marquise Brown, especially now in hindsight, knowing that DeAndre Hopkins is going to miss the first 6 weeks. I feel like that's going to be really big for them. They also re-signed Zach Ertz to a 3-year deal. I think they may have, overdone it with the years on the contract, but Zach Ertz is a proven guy. So if anyone's gonna age well, it would be him. But I think that's just a lot of faith to put in a guy who's already past 30. And let's see here. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say really with the Cardinals. I mean, I'm not super high on them going into this year, just based on all the pieces that they lost. But I also aren't going to count them out. They still have a lot of young pieces that if they step up, could really make a huge difference for this team.
Yeah, it's a talented roster, and it obviously all starts with Kyler Murray, who left a sour taste in her mouth with the finish to last year in that wild card game. Just wasn't good at all. The offense had no juice whatsoever. Just there were some injuries. He had to deal with constant injuries, but that's no excuse, as every team is dealing with injuries at that time. You get the money that you want. There was, of course, the whole fiasco with the contract and the clause that was put in the contract, where sort of made Kyler and the Cardinals look bad, that sort of thing. We won't get into that right now. The bottom line is, you led this team to the playoffs, and now it's time to take that next step. You get this team to the playoffs again, show what you can do on a consistent basis. We know you have the talent. We know you're extremely talented. You were the number one quarterback, high school quarterback coming out of Texas. You won a Heisman Trophy at Oklahoma. You've had success so far in the league. The Cardinals have gotten better in terms of wins each year you've been in the league, but now it's time to take that next step. Your front office, they went out and got you an established guy in Marquise Brown, who has rapport with Kyler Murray from his days at Oklahoma. So that's nice, especially in the absence of DeAndre Hopkins for the first couple weeks. I think, do they still have AJ Green? I'm not exactly
they
sure.
still have AJ Green as well. Yeah.
Despite some miscommunication with Kyler Murray not being on the same page at all times, he's still a respectable 2021 for a guy who's a little bit older, established veteran like he is. I think he's going to be important. Had over 800 yards receiving last year. Hopefully he can repeat that. I like this skill position group, especially the running backs. I love, obviously I like James Conner. I have a soft spot for James Conner. But I like some of the other guys they have in this backfield as well. In the offensive line, I mean, they have veterans on this offensive line. So I don't foresee it being too much of a problem. So I like this offense. It's just all predicated on Kyler Murray. We've seen improvement each season, but last year left a bad taste in our mouths. We need to see it again. And then defensively, for me, it's really all about obviously you lose Chandler Jones, so that's not great. But for me, really what I want to see from the Cardinals defense, they got a lot of young talent, especially in the middle of that defense with Isaiah Simmons, a guy they drafted a couple years ago out of Clemson, and then Zaven Collins, who is a guy they drafted last year out of Tulsa. I need to see what this young linebacker group has got in store, because I think it's going to be a key to this defense unlocking its full potential. I like the secondary. Buda Baker's obviously a stud. And then some other pieces there as well. Byron Murphy, the guy they drafted a couple of years ago, Jeff Gladney out of TCU, and others. And obviously, you still have J.J. Watt, some veterans on that defensive line. But I'm really interested to watch this young linebacker group try and prove itself And if it does, it could be dangerous. I mean, there's a lot of athleticism there with
Yeah.
Collins, Simmons, a guy they drafted from San Diego State this year, and Cameron Thomas, Marcus Golden, and others. But I don't know. It's basically Kyler Murray, stay healthy, and then I need to see this linebacker group. But I think the Cardinals will be a good team. They'll be vying for a playoff spot, but we'll see where it goes. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned those linebackers. Those are two that I meant to mention earlier, but they're a rare breed in today's NFL. Two linebackers who are over 250 pounds and can run like they do and can cover. I mean, they have so much potential as a linebacker duo. And even Isaiah Simmons, he's a guy you could even move around to safety. Even you could put him on the edge. You can do a lot of different things with those two guys. So I'm interested to see that as well. But the question I have for the Cardinals is, can they win in December? That's been the question, the last couple of years. They've gotten off to these good starts with the Cliff Kingsbury era, and they just haven't seemed to close seasons well. And the thing that we see so often with championship level teams is they know when to kick it into high gear. I mean, last year, what did we see with the Rams? I mean, they were kind of going through the motions kind of midway through the season. A lot of people were questioning where they were at. And then all of a sudden, boom, they turn it on and they close out the year on a huge run. And that's what you have to do if you want to be a championship contender. So I really want to see that happen because they haven't shown to have the toughness needed to win in the late months of the year when it gets cold because they're a dome team. That's what dome teams tend to do. But they got to get out of that. They got to get out of that trap that they're in.
Right. So I guess with that, talk about December football. Well, let's look at their schedule because if you look at their December schedule this year, well, obviously, first of all, I don't like their schedule. I just looked at it. Don't love it at all. They don't get a break at all right out of the gates. Kansas City, playoff team. Vegas, possible playoff team from last year. The Rams, Super Bowl champions. Carolina, who knows? But Philadelphia, playoff team. At Seattle, that's probably a dub. New Orleans, who knows? On a Thursday night on a short week after you go to Seattle, you got to go all the way back east. At Minnesota, Seattle again. So you get those Seattle games out of the way, get some wins early, I guess. But then at the Rams, San Francisco. This is going into late November. At the Rams, San Francisco, Chargers, bye week, all the way, and I guess that would be week 13. And then coming out of the bye week in December, you got New England, you have at Denver, you have Tampa Bay, Atlanta, that's probably a dub, but then at San Francisco. I don't know, man. It's not easy at all.
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be extremely tough. But Kyler Murray, he got his payday. You know, but he still has a lot to prove. He still has to show that he's worth that.
Right.
In my opinion, obviously, he's shown to have the potential to be worth that. But to this point in the NFL, he hasn't gotten it done in the big games. That's what you have to do to be a big time quarterback.
Right. So with that, we can move on. We're moving along well. I'll put that in the chat, our timestamp for that. But lead us into the 49ers.
Yeah, the 49ers are going into a new era as well. A little bit similar um, to the Seattle Seahawks, but for different reasons. There's a lot of optimism coming out of San Francisco. They're a team coming off a run to the NFC Championship game, and now they enter the era of Trey Lance. Was he third overall? He was the third overall pick, I believe, in the in last year's draft. So he's entering his second year, his first year as a starter. And, you know, the idea is that he will bring a lot of juice to this offense that they didn't have last year. And this defense has come back strong as well. That defense last year was extremely impressive, especially to close the year. Um, and they're getting Javon Kinlaw back. Their defensive tackle that they traded DeForest Buckner to get. And you know this team, there is playmakers up and down the roster. I mean, if you're looking at a roster that's built well, that's not top heavy, but still has star players. I mean, there's not many teams I would name before the 49ers. They might even be the first team I name.
Right. One of the best things that they have going for them is they have what not many other teams have right now, and that's a young head coach that's on the right side of the ball with an offense he knows how to run and is experienced in running, and that works with the personnel that they have on this team. So I love that. Kyle Shanahan is one of the best in the business, no doubt about that. But the real question is, you had a lot of success with Jimmy Garoppolo in terms of winning football games, getting deep into the playoffs. You got to a Super Bowl, almost won the damn thing. And you got to another NFC Championship game, had some other playoff wins mixed in there. So that's all good and great. Garoppolo 31-14 record as the 49ers starter, plus 4-2 in the playoffs, including a Super Bowl appearance. Was really known for his leadership ability and his ability to galvanize the troops, I guess, if you will. So now all that falls on Trey Lance. And my main question with Trey Lance, we all know he has the talent. I mean, we saw flashes in the preseason game. We all know about his strength. We know about his mobility. We know about his intelligence. And we know that he's a good guy and potentially the next leader of this football team. But the question stems with his accuracy. I know it's a small sample size, but he hasn't played a lot of football in the past couple of years. 71 passes last year, a 57% completion percentage, and only 318 total passes at North Dakota State. I got to see the accuracy and the release. Wasn't sure about his release. I don't like to go too far into mechanics because I don't claim to be an expert on that. But the release just didn't look right at times. I need to see him improve in that department. But I think with more playing time and his talent, the sky's the limit. So we obviously understand why they're moving off Garoppolo. I think it's a good time to do it. Obviously, they still got to trade Garoppolo, but they're waiting for the right time to do that. Love the weapons that they have. Obviously, after Deebo Samuel, wasn't happy early on in the offseason, being able to sign him back and lock him up long term was critical and crucial to this offseason. I like that they added some speed with Ray McCloud, the guy I know in his days with Pittsburgh. He should help this offense and will fit the scheme and what they're trying to do. George Kittle, we all know what George Kittle is. He just needs to stay on the football field. Availability is the best ability. And then Brandon Ayuk, a guy who we both love. So I love these weapons. I love the running back as well. The running game has always been potent with Elijah Mitchell. Trey Sermon is a guy who's coming into his second year out of Ohio State. They've always had that fantastic fullback in Kyle Juszczyk. They use him in some different ways. So that running game will obviously be quite a help, I guess you could say, to a young quarterback. But yeah, with the scheme and the weapons that they have, we know this offense is going to have success. My main question is Trey Lance, the accuracy. I hope it works out. They moved up to get him, and he looked good. We've seen some special, and that's what you like to see. But yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm excited to watch him more this preseason if I get the opportunity to. And then obviously the defense. You mentioned it's coming back healthy. Fred Warner mans the middle along with Dre Greenlaw. Love their linebacker group.
Yep.
Obviously, we know what they have up front with Bosa and Armstead, et cetera, et cetera. Javon Kinlaw, got a talented guy they drafted out of South Carolina a couple of years ago. Um, and then obviously a big addition in the secondary. I love Jimmy Ward at the safety position, but they get Charvarius Ward, the cornerback from Kansas City. They signed him to a 3-year, $40 million deal to kind of solidify that cornerback spot. So, yeah, I like this team. I think if Trey Lance pans out like many think he could, they could compete to possibly even win this division. But I definitely think they're a playoff bound team, especially in the a weaker NFC.
Right, exactly. And they're also picked up a safety, Talanza Hufunga, who um, I had just learned about the other day is being trained by Troy Polamalu, and he also has the hair to match. So I'm sure as a Steelers fan, you can appreciate that. He's a big hitting safety. I really like his game as well. I mean, this defense is going to be so good, and with Kyle Shanahan running the offense, I mean, he's been successful in every single stop he's had. You know, going back to his days with the Texans with Matt Schaub, with the um, name redacted team, now they're the Commanders with Kirk Cousins, the Falcons with Matt Ryan, and so on and so on. I mean, he's been successful at every stop, and I don't see that stopping now with Trey Lance.
Right. Yeah. Shanahan's one of the best, and I mean, he's top 5 in the league in my opinion. The things he does with this offense. He won with Garoppolo, and now you have a more talented, more dynamic quarterback in Trey Lance, who, if he's accurate enough, this with all the weapons he has in this running game, I mean, it could be potent along with this defense. One thing I'll mention before we talk about their schedule that I didn't, and I don't think has been mentioned yet, they did lose Laken Tomlinson, who was one of their starting guards on that offensive line, was a Pro Bowler. Not great. He was durable, never missed a start in his years with the 49ers. Made his debut in 2017, only missed a few snaps. So, although I still really like the offensive line, I mean, you have Alex Mack. You still have one of the best, if not the best, left tackles in the game in Trent Williams. Um, Mike McGlinchey at right tackle, and others. Aaron Banks is a guy who they drafted out of Notre Dame last year. He was an All-American guard at Notre Dame, but played only 5 snaps last year in his rookie season. He's going to have to fill in at that guard position, and that's really the only hole or question along that offensive line that I'm really looking to see. But yeah, otherwise, I like where this 49ers team is at right now. So before we move on, let's take a look at their schedule. And, you know, as opposed to the teams we've talked about so far, they do sort of get a break out of the gates. I like that they get Chicago and Seattle right out of the gates. Those should be 2 pretty winnable games. At Denver and the Rams, I mean, that'll be tough, but then Carolina's a winnable game. Atlanta's a winnable game. Then you have Kansas City and LA. But they do have more winnable games early than the previous teams in their division. So if you can lock up those winnable games and win some of the harder ones, you could be in a great position going into your bye week, which I do like, split right down the middle. And then it gets a little bit more tough sledding coming out of the bye week. But hopefully at that point, as the weather gets colder, we go into mid-November, into December, and into January. the advantage that this Niners team has is they know how to play smash mouth football, running the football and playing defense. So hopefully at that time, Trey Lance has his, I guess, feet under him, is playing comfortable within this offense, and that defense and running game can really be beneficial at that point. And hopefully they're a little bit healthier at that point also than in years past. But I do like their schedule better than the Seahawks and the Cardinals.
Right. Yep. Yeah, this is the first schedule we've seen in this series for a while, at least, that where it seems to have been, a good break for this team, which is good to see. If they can, get off to a good start, come out of the gates 2-0, possibly 3-0, that could really, mean a lot towards their season because, with a young quarterback, with a new starter in there, it's going to be really important to build up his confidence out of the gate. Because if things start to click, you really want to make sure that he gets there by the time that bye week rolls around.
Exactly. So yeah, we have a very positive outlook. I'm very high on the 49ers. And I'm super excited to watch Trey Lance. But let's move on to the last team in the NFC West. Why don't you start us off with the Super Bowl champions, Los Angeles Rams?
Yeah, the Rams, man, they found a way to get to get it done this offseason. They went into the offseason in, for lack of a better word, I mean they were pretty much in cap hell going in, but they found a way to come out of it with, picking up wide receiver Allen Robinson, picking up Bobby Wagner. I mean they lost a few pieces here and there, but I mean they had a really good draft, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I really liked what they did in this offseason. And, you know, based on what they had available to them, they really didn't have much expectation to have a good offseason. So I really think with the cards they were dealt, they may have had the best offseason dollar for dollar if you're really looking at it that way. Um, but yeah, I just think the veteran leadership that they were able to add, and year two of Matthew Stafford, I think will be less volatile. I guess a little bit more consistent, hopefully. Um, so I really like how that team is looking for sure.
Yeah, we're going into year 6 of the Sean McVay era with the Rams. And in the time that Les Snead has manned the GM position and McVay, in the time that they've worked together, three NFC West titles, and 2 Super Bowl appearances, including a win last year in the big game. You get Matt Stafford last off season. I think don't expect anything less. I think he's dealing with some elbow stuff in his throwing arm. Uh, not quite sure, but they don't seem to be too worried about it, so I'm not too worried about that. Love the defense. Obviously, get a guy like Bobby Wagner and just, put him in the middle of this defense. That never hurts. Leonard Floyd, Aaron Donald, the best in the game, and others love the defensive front. Not much else to say about the secondary. You have Jalen Ramsey, and others love the defense. Really nothing to say there. Cam Akers is coming back after an Achilles tear. We'll see what he looks like, but regardless, I like the run game. Love Sean McVay. They lose Robert Woods, who goes to Tennessee, but they still have Van Jefferson, a guy who I really like to step up in that role. Cooper Kupp, one of the best in the game. They add Allen Robinson to, again, fill that void, and I expect big things out of him, considering, he had a big year 2 years ago. in Chicago, and then Tyler Higbee and others. I mean, what do you say? They won the Super Bowl, and typically after you win the Super Bowl, guys get paid. You're not able to keep a lot of these guys. There were actually discussions and rumors about Aaron Donald possibly retiring earlier this offseason, right after the Super Bowl, but he ends up coming back. You lose Odell, but you get Allen Robinson. You lose, Darius Williams, but secondary still fine. You insert Bobby Wagner. You just keep supplementing this team and being aggressive, going out in free agency and getting major talent through free agency and then supplementing it with some good draft picks. The schedule isn't too brutal. There's some tough ones early, but this is the Rams that we're talking about. This is the Super Bowl champions. Hopefully, we don't see the Super Bowl hangover. I don't think we will. But yeah, I love Stafford. Love what this team has going for it right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this team, you know, I think a lot of people may be overlooking them a little bit. They, I think the Allen Robinson signing isn't get talked about enough. He's a guy who, if you look at his career, has never had a good quarterback situation. He's finally able to go to LA and have a good quarterback throwing to him. So there's no telling what he'll be able to do with Sean McVay being able to scheme him open as well. Um, I don't know, man. I really like this offseason. I think they're in a really good position to really position, to really solidify their status as a home field advantage type of team if they can get it done. Um, yeah, it was really a lot of reloading on the edges. They really didn't lose much of their main talent. But one thing I will say though is um, their safeties. Last year they brought in Eric Weddle to supplement that safety group, and then he retired after the Super Bowl. So that's one question I do have. Before Eric Weddle came in, that was a spot where they really struggled. I mean, it wasn't a struggle, but it wasn't great. So if they're able to, have Taylor Rapp or Nick Scott step up and be a little bit better going into this year, that would really make a big difference. Um, but other than that, there really isn't much to say about this team, man. They're Super Bowl champs for a reason.
Right. I mean, I'd argue you have a tier one quarterback with Matt Stafford. You have all the weapons you need. Cam Akers coming off a Achilles tear isn't great, but we'll see what he looks like. The offensive line is solidified. Defensive front is obviously really good. With Aaron Donald manning that front, you're always going to be, and Leonard Floyd and others, you're always going to be pretty good up front. Love the team in the trenches. The secondary is something to keep an eye out for. I mean, you do lose Darius Williams, who was a solid number 2 corner in this defense last year opposite Jalen Ramsey. The Jaguars went out. They paid big money for him. I don't really blame the Rams for not, upping their offer for Williams because they have so many other things to worry about coming off a Super Bowl victory. But that will be something to watch. But I trust this coaching staff and the development of the players in this secondary. They did get Troy Hill, who's a veteran guy in free agency, going into the 7th year out of Oregon. So they did make some moves to supplement what they lost, but obviously the leadership of Eric Weddle will be something else to watch. But with Jalen Ramsey back there, I don't really worry all that much. So yeah, I think the expectation is to get back to the big game, but obviously that's not going to be easy because we've only seen a couple teams do it past 20 years. And I think if I'm not mistaken, the only team that did it had Tom Brady. So I don't know. We'll see.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Let's take a look at this schedule here before we move on to the next thing here. First impression, I'd say the bye week is a little bit early. Week 7 for a 17-week season, 18-week season. It's a little bit early, I'd say. They're going to have a long stretch of games to close the year. That's not great. Buffalo week 1, that's going to be pretty tough, but they do get that game at home. And then they have Atlanta and Arizona, 2 possibly, winnable games. But you have a tough divisional game. That's going to, those are always, pretty flippy floppy most of the time. I don't know if that's a word, but um, and then San Francisco, Dallas, 2 pretty tough games. I'd say uh, you can probably win against Dallas. That kind of hurts as like a Cowboys fan, but and then Carolina, that's winnable. Then you have the bye week. Then San Francisco again, Tampa Bay, Arizona. That's a tough little stretch right there. New Orleans, Kansas City, and then you kind of have a little bit of a more winnable game with Seattle, and then you play Las Vegas, Green Bay, Denver, Los Angeles, and then you close the year with Seattle. So they have um, a lot of tough games on the schedule. I mean, that's expected for a Super Bowl champion, but they kind of get it in waves. You have a stretch of 4 or 5 games against tough teams, and they'll get one game against one of the lesser teams. So we'll have to see how they're able to do. I'd say it's probably going to be pretty important for their guys to, you know, really get healthy during that bye week because they've got a long stretch of football after it.
Right. I don't worry all that much about the tough games early. This team has typically been pretty good at
Mm.
starting fast. They started like 6 or 7-1 last year. The only loss coming uh, week 4, the game against Arizona. The thing that really stands out to me with their schedule, obviously, the week 7 bye week isn't great. You like to have that a little later on, but this like late October, November stretch that they have that you mentioned right after the bye week with San Francisco, Tampa Bay, Arizona, New Orleans, and Kansas City, 5 potential playoff teams. I'm really interested to see if they get off to a fast start. They're running, right out of the gates, winning games. They get to that bye week, the dog days of the NFL regular season, now that it's 17 games, right in the middle of that schedule with those games, does it get a little rough going? And if they get through that stretch, are they do they run out of gas towards the end? I don't know. I don't expect it. I don't expect them to have any troubles with that. But yeah, that's really the thing that stood out to me right away. That 5-game stretch right out of the bye week before they play Seattle on December 4th.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Anything else you want to add on the Rams?
Not really. I mean, I expect this team. Uh, I believe they're up there, if not the favorite again to go win the Super Bowl. And with the NFC, I think they have a good chance. So we'll see. Sean McVay is Sean McVay. So I'm excited to see. Obviously, the most exciting thing I think is going to be the games that they play within the division against Arizona. See how Kyler Murray fares, and then obviously the Niners. Those are going to be the games I'm looking out for.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I think this division is going to be, a 2-horse race. I think Arizona can get in there maybe early, but I think by the end of the season, the cream of the crop of the division will show itself to be those two teams.
Right. Okay. So with that being said, about 55 minutes. That's going to do it for our NFC West segment. That was really fun. I thought we covered pretty much everything. So with that, we're going to talk a little college football for the first time this season, really. So where do you want to start? You want to start with Heisman talk, or do you want to talk about this coaching poll that came out earlier this week?
Let's start with Heisman talk. I'm pretty interested in how this is going to turn out.
Okay, so what stands out to you right off the bat in terms of Heisman talk?
Well, to me, comes down to the two, main quarterbacks, the main, protagonists from last year, Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud. You can't really go too far down the list without mentioning them. I mean, you know, they're the two key guys going into next year's draft as well. They're the two main prospects. Um, I mean, there's not much else you can really say, man. I mean, C.J. Stroud, he always puts up numbers. He's played really well in the big games as well against Michigan and, Penn State and all of those key games. Maybe not Penn State, but the teams I'm referring to when I say the big games. And then Bryce Young, who his poise in the pocket is what impressed me the most last year. I think um, it's always about winning the big games and then playing big in the big games when you're talking about the Heisman. So I think those are the two guys that have to be at the top of the list if you're talking about predictions.
Absolutely, and I actually favor C.J. Stroud over Bryce Young, just because number one, it's hard to win back-to-back Heisman's. There have been quarterbacks who have done it before, but really hard to do. And look, I think Ohio State, and we'll talk about this more in a future podcast once we start really digging deep on the teams and the contenders. Ohio State is primed to not only have one of the most explosive offenses we've ever seen, but to win a national championship. With C.J. Stroud, he's got another a year in Ryan Day's offense under his belt. Was a really good year last year. 44-6 touchdown interception ratio. Over 4,400 yards. Completed 71% of his passes, and I've only expect bigger and better things from him this year. He finished fourth last year in the Heisman running. So I think he should be the favorite going into this year. He'll benefit from another year in Ryan Day's offense, another year as a starter, and the weapons that he has, I think, also have a chance to enter the conversation with their number one receiver entering this year, possibly the best receiver in the country come season in, Jackson Smith and Jigma, who had a humongous performance in the Rose Bowl against Utah, if you remember that.
Yeah.
He's obviously, I think he could join the likes of Devontae Smith and other great receivers who have won the Heisman before recently. You look at his numbers from last year, 95 receptions, 1,600 yards and 9 touchdowns. Now he's the number one guy, so there is some more responsibility there. But, if you've watched this kid, he's the next big thing. And he'll be up there next year in the draft too as well as one of the top receivers. And then Trayvon Henderson, their running back. He burst onto the scene last year as a true freshman, rushed for about 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns. The thing that concerns me is if all these players that I'm mentioning have great seasons, they might have to split the votes, and that could hurt their cases. Because obviously, if you have to split votes with some of your teammates, that might hurt your case to actually win the award. But I mean, all these players on Ohio State's offense, Henderson and Jigma, or CJ Stroud could win the damn thing. Obviously, Bryce Young has a flying opportunity to do that back to back. Alabama is going to be really good once again. And his teammate on the other side of the football, and Will Anderson, we saw um, the Lions pick the Michigan guy. God, why am I blanking on his name?
Aiden Hutchinson.
Aiden Hutchinson. Yeah, we saw him in New York last year at the Heisman ceremony. I believe he finished third, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, why can't Will Anderson, the linebacker for Alabama? We want to talk defense. 17 and a half sacks last year. I mean, that's just ridiculous for a college player.
Yeah.
So he's, Alabama, I think some people would say, have the best player on offense in Bryce Young and the best player on defense, undisputably, in Will Anderson. So yeah, I like him. You can never count out an Oklahoma quarterback, even though he's a transfer, and Dylan Gabriel, who's we know Oklahoma has a new coaching staff. They lose Lincoln Riley, but Dylan Gabriel's a guy who's established starter. Obviously, has gone through some injuries the past couple of years, but in 2019 at Central Florida, UCF, he was absolutely fantastic. 61 touchdowns, 11 interceptions before getting injured. And now with, his reuniting with his offensive coordinator there at UCF, here at Oklahoma, Jeff Lebby, I think you could see a big season from him. And with the track record that Oklahoma has, even though Lincoln Riley's not there anymore at Heisman winning quarterbacks, I wouldn't be surprised. It just wouldn't surprise me. And then obviously, I'll give Texas a little love. Bijan Robinson, with an improved offensive line, some more weapons on the outside, and hopefully better quarterback play as well, could be in the running if Texas ends up exceeding expectations. So yeah, those are the guys I'm watching out for the Heisman.
Yeah, I mean you basically nailed every guy I wanted to mention. One guy I will mention though is Caleb Williams. I mean that dude is an absolute stud. He's moving over from Oklahoma to USC with Lincoln Riley. He's a guy that Lincoln Riley's already accustomed to. His style of play, what he's good at, and you know I wouldn't put it past him, Lincoln Riley. Having another Heisman winning quarterback, but I'm not exactly betting on it because I think USC has to have maybe a year or two of rebuilding that roster before they're competitive enough to have a Heisman winner. But he's certainly a guy who has all the talent and some to be able to do it.
Absolutely. He burst onto the scene in the Red River rivalry game after we saw a lot of struggles with Spencer Rattler, who's now transferred to South Carolina. But yeah, I think don't put it past Lincoln Riley to do anything. That offense is going to be great. I mean, Caleb Williams, you bring over Jordan Addison, the Biletnikoff winner for the best receiver in the country from Pittsburgh, to put right in that offense. You get some other recruits. You have a solid foundation on the offensive line. Question for USC is how quickly can they build up this defense? Once they can do that, which I think is going to take a couple of years, they can really insert themselves into national championship caliber contention. Right now, I think they're going to be a good team. I think they're going to double their win total from 4 to about 8 or 9, just with the talent that Caleb Williams is. But yeah, the question mainly for USC is their defense because it was pretty pitiful last year. Anywho, I sent you the coaches poll over text. So if you go back in your text, we can talk real fast about this coaches poll that was released earlier this week and some of the things that stand out to us. Real fast, while Emmy is pulling that up, I'll run through the top 20, the top 20 teams. Starts how you pretty much expect it would, with Bama number 1, Ohio State number 2, Georgia, the defending national champions, number 3. Clemson reasserts itself in the top 4. Number 4, 5, Notre Dame. 6, Michigan, coming off its Big Ten championship victory and college football playoff appearance. 7, A&M, lots of big expectations in College Station, but the questions all surround quarterback play. With Jimbo Fisher's team, Utah, a team that I think should be favored to win the Pac-12 after a run to the Rose Bowl last year. What Kyle Whittingham is doing with Utah as a football team is beyond me incredible. Oklahoma still remains up there. They still have the expectations. They're Oklahoma. You know what you're going to get. Now you get a guy in Brent Venables coming over from Clemson who is going to really get the most out of that defense, I think. And if Dillon Gabriel is what we think he is, they're going to be tough to beat. Baylor, who won the Big 12 last year. Oklahoma State, another great Big 12 team up there as well. Then you get Oregon, NC State, solid ACC team that I think a lot of people are overlooking. Michigan State with Mel Tucker. USC at number 15. This is sort of where you get to the territory of teams that have expectations but haven't really proved things yet. Teams that are looking to get back to that national championship caliber conversation, contention sort of thing, with teams like Michigan State, USC, Miami at number 17, Texas at number 18, Wake Forest, who had a good run last year, and then Wisconsin. So what sort of stands out to you?
The first, light bulb that popped in my head is when you mentioned Clemson at 4. I find that pretty interesting. They have their quarterback coming back, second-year starter DJ Ugalele, I think is his name. But Clemson always has the talent. I mean, I don't question that, but putting it into practice, and executing on that is going to be the question for me. But they are in the ACC, a conference with a lot of questions. So, with the power vacuum that's there in their conference, I think it's pretty fair to say they can rise to the top of that. Next question mark, I'd say, is probably, Oklahoma State and Baylor, I'd say. Those are two teams that I think, couple things change, and Oklahoma State could have ended up in the college football playoff.
Right.
And I mean that's no small feat. So those are two teams that I think might be slept on a little bit. I'm not going to say they're too low, but I think where they are is fair. But I think by the end of the year they could be higher than where they're at. That's all I'm going to say.
Absolutely. I'll just run through a couple things I want to mention, and then we can wrap this thing up. Obviously, something that stood out to me was the Big 12 getting its respect in this poll. We obviously talked about Oklahoma. They have a new head coach. They've lost a lot of players to the portal, as we mentioned with Caleb Williams. But I think they have a clear path towards another Big 12 championship. Dillon Gabriel, phenomenal season, as I mentioned, at UCF in 2019. He reunites with his offensive coordinator, Jeff Lebby, who was the offensive coordinator at UCF at that time, and comes over from Ole Miss. And we saw what Ole Miss's offense looked like last year with Matt Corral at manning the quarterback position. So I expect big things from Oklahoma. Venables knows defense better than anybody, and they have some talent on that side of the ball. And the good thing is they get some of their tougher games at home this season. Last year, they had to go on the road to play Baylor. They had to go on the road to play Oklahoma State. This year, they get those games at home. And the Texas game, of course, is sort of a neutral site. So they don't have a lot of tough road games. And so I like that for OU. From a Baylor Oklahoma State perspective, obviously I love Baylor's coach, Dave Aranda. Talk about a defensive-minded coach. Defensive-minded coaches in the Big 12. This is not something we're used to, okay? But it's happening. He did an amazing job last year. 6 returning starters on defense. Should be a top 15 defense just like they were last year. O-line is solid. They had a good running game last year. They do have tough road games. They got to go to OU and BYU, but they do get Oklahoma State at home, and that will be a rematch of the Big 12 championship game. And then Oklahoma State, I expect big things. They've always had a great defense. Their defense carried them to 12 wins last year in FBS to bowl victory, but only 4 starters back on defense. Not as much experience on that defense now, so we'll have to see how that pans out. But still really like them as a team. The common thread you have with these top 3 horses in the Big 12 that I worry about is they all have the potential to be really good on defense. I'm not sure you can say the same thing about Texas. It's getting better. The recruiting has been good. There's some young talent I'm excited to see play on this Texas defense. But going up against tough defenses like Baylor, like Oklahoma, like Oklahoma State, who really, I think, should be expected, at least preseason, to be the cream of the crop in the Big 12, we're going to have to see, especially with an offensive line that, while improved, is young. And these defensive fronts you see from Baylor, Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma could be tough. So, I don't know. We can talk about Texas more on a future podcast. But yeah, all the programs you expect to be up there are up there. Alabama, Ohio State. I mean, we really don't need to talk about them. I think everybody's talking about everybody but the defending national champions, Georgia. But don't forget about Georgia. Even though they lost a bunch of talent, they reload. They finally lifted the monkey off their shoulders, beating Bama in the national championship game. And yeah, Kirby Smart's one of the best in the business. So this Clemson deal is interesting. This is the last thing I'll say. Before last year, it was a dynasty basically in college football. 6 straight ACC championships, some national championship game appearances in the days of Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson. But last year was really the first year where we saw mediocre quarterback play out of DJ Uyagagale. And yeah, they still won 10 games with a not so great offense. I mean, it's Clemson. They still, in a down year, won 10 games. But I think Uyagagale just has too much talent to not improve on what he did last year and to not be better than he was last year. And this defense, I mean, their defensive line is, with the talent they have on this defensive line, it's reminiscent of the talent they had back in 2017, 2018 when they had that dominant defensive line that carried them to a national championship. So I like their defense. They obviously lose Venables, but the talent on this defense, I don't know. Could see big things out of Clemson once again.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Anything you want to add on the coaches poll or?
Michigan is another interesting team. They're coming off a Big Ten championship game. Obviously, finally beat Ohio State last year. There is a quarterback question there. There's a quarterback battle going on. So that will be an interesting watch through the rest of fall camp and going into the season. But J.J. McCarthy, a talented guy, is expected to win that job. So hopefully, I mean, with the defense that they have and the running game that they have, if they get and they might have the best offensive line in college football with the experience they have up front. They get some better quarterback play this year, they could do it again. They could challenge Ohio State, but we'll have to see. And then I mentioned Utah. Don't forget about Utah. I know they're sort of out there in the Midwest or in the Pac-12. Everyone wants to talk about USC and this and that, UCLA and this and that, but Utah, man, you don't want to see Utah. Trust me.
Yeah. Utah is legit. They're always really, really good over there in the Pac-12 for sure. One team that I'm surprised is left off the list is Cincinnati.
I think they made the poll at 22, but I just didn't mention them. Another team that's down there as well.
Okay, yeah, I see them. Okay.
Another team that's down there as well is Arkansas. I mean, the SEC is a gauntlet, but what they're doing down there with KJ Richardson and some of the other guys that they have, whew, they're tough. Ole Miss obviously loses their quarterback, and then Houston. So yeah, there are a lot of teams. I don't know. We'll dive more into this on a future podcast because we still have a couple weeks to dig more into the teams themselves. But I like this as a start to our college football talk.
Right, exactly. Okay. Where are we sitting at on time here?
We're at 1:16, 1 hour 16 minutes. So it's up to you.
Okay, yeah. Let's continue. Let's go ahead and continue. You had some things you wanted to say about Tatis Jr. So, I'm guessing it's going to be like 5-10 minutes. So it's no big deal.
Yeah, I'll make this quick. Look, let's just start here. 18 months ago, um, AJ Preller, the general manager of the San Diego Padres, and the owner or the chairman, Peter Seidler, sat in front of a camera way back when the pandemic was raging and the press conferences were dominated by Zoom. They last spring, February, 18 months ago, announced a 14-year, $340 million extension to Fernando Tatis, who had just come off a great rookie season. And they locked up their star. He's an electrifying baseball player, playing the shortstop position, arguably the most electric young star in the game. And they locked him up for 14 years. When they didn't have necessarily that urgency that they had to pay him at that moment in time because they still had years of control before they really had to pay him. It wasn't like this, some of the other situations going on around the league with Aaron Judge, and some others. But they gave him that big extension, and with that came big, big responsibility. You're a 22-year-old superstar. You're expected to do big things. You're expected to be the centerpiece of this franchise. And obviously now some things have changed. You bring in Juan Soto, and obviously that's looking real good right now, especially considering the fact that Tatis won't be coming back this season at all. But yeah, it was announced on Friday that out of nowhere he was just about to come back. He had been playing minor league rehab games, coming off this wrist injury that he sustained due to a motorcycle accident in the off season that required surgery and a 3+ month recovery. It's had a bit of a slow recovery. And it was just announced Friday the 80-game suspension, which will carry through the playoffs and into the next 40 games, first 40 games of next season. Not what you want out of your 23-year-old superstar shortstop who there's a reason, not just on the field, that they gave him all this money. Supposed to be a leader in that clubhouse. And on that day that they announced the extension, this is what their chairman had to say. It's a thrilling day. There's probably not too many 14-year contracts ahead in my lifetime, but I hope there are because in this case the stars are aligned. I know I was nowhere near as mature as this 22-year-old adult. Note mature as the word there is when I was 22. But he has a passion to do great things in his profession. There's a lot of trust, particularly between Fernando and AJ, which I'm sure came through pretty loud and pretty clear via this extension. So from getting the extension to having a shoulder injury last year to fighting with Machado in the dugout last year when things were absolutely going south late last year in the regular season, to collapsing late last year in the regular season, to not making smart decisions in the offseason, not getting your shoulder fixed, waiting to get your shoulder surgery, getting into a motorcycle accident, breaking your wrist, not being there for your team up until this point, and now this. It's just, for a fan of the game of baseball, for as much as I talk about the young talent, the extreme, loads of young talent we have in today's game, and Tatis is fantastic. I'm not saying he's not a great baseball player, but it just seems like, whether it's fair or not, you're 23 years old, you're the superstar, you're seen by many fans to be an ambassador for the game of baseball. You're getting paid all this money, 13 years, $340 million by the San Diego Padres. That does not include any of the endorsement deals that he has. And now all these things, which has limited his availability, limited, his ability to play. I don't care what the reason he said was for taking whatever banned substance he took. You just can't do it. You can't do it when you have this much responsibility. But people make mistakes. Hopefully he comes back better than ever. I really do like Fernando Tatis. So hopefully this isn't too much of a stain on his resume and on his legacy.
Yeah, I think everything you said there was fair. I mean, as a guy who's more of a casual baseball fan, you know, I've always seen that there's like a lot of, fire and emotion behind Tatis. Um, Most notably the time where I believe he hit a home run when they were up like 14 to 0 or something against one of the teams, and a lot of people were off put by that, but that's that fire in him, that's that competitive spirit in him, and I think there's a lot of good in that, and there's also he's got to find a way to tame it in a little bit. So hopefully you can learn from it. It is what it is at this point. There's no going back now. So now paired with Juan Soto, maybe less of the responsibility will fall on him to be, the guy. So maybe that'll even help him. But the talent is still there, man. There's still time.
Oh, absolutely. The talent's absolutely there, and they can still compete for a World Series. It just was really disappointing from the fact that, the money is sort of that was going to be there either way for a guy of Tatis's caliber. And, sooner rather than later, even though Soto has 2 years of control left after this year, they're going to be looking to pay him as well. But I'm sure for a guy like Juan Soto, who just got there from Washington, hoping to, pair up with Tatis, and with the front office moves that they made at the trading deadline, really being aggressive, not only getting Soto but getting Josh Hader, who's a lights out bullpen arm, one of the best in the game, along with Josh Bell and first baseman who's hitting over 300, Brandon Drury, all these guys, all these pieces, and you're just not going to be available for your team because you took a banned substance and you, for whatever reason, got into a motorcycle accident. Things happen, I understand, but and I know he's still super young, but I just a little disappointed. That's all. A little disappointed.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. 100% fair. Okay, yeah, that's gonna do it, guys, for episode 116. I hope you enjoyed that. That was a jam-packed episode. Make sure to drop a like. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Leave a 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening to it on podcast services. And we'll catch y'all soon. And I'll let Michael sign us off here.
Yeah, we'll catch y'all soon. In fact, we will catch you on Tuesday. We have a banger of an episode coming for you on Tuesday. We're going to be in person. And for you NBA fans out there, you might want to tune in. So, yeah, with that, that's going to do it for episode 116 of the Raw Prospect Podcast. And I guess just like Fernando Tatis's chances of playing in a game this season or the first 40 games next season, plus Sepp Straka's chances of winning a PGA tournament event by hitting the ball into the water on the third playoff hole of today's tournament.
Oof.
Against Will Zalatoris, who, congratulations, won his first event of the FedEx Cup playoffs.
Who also hit it in the water.
He almost hit in the water. He had an unplayable ball.
Yeah.
Dug. But just like all of that, we are gone. Peace out.
Peace out, guys.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to click on one of these 2 videos right here. Our latest video right here on the left, or the video YouTube recommends for you on the right.